Have you ever wondered what it feels like to spend your whole life building a home with love, only to return one day and feel like a stranger inside your own walls? That's the question that has haunted me these past years. Before I begin, let me pause to thank you for being here, for listening to an old woman's story. Your time means more to me than you know. And if you're comfortable, I'd love for you to tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time of day it is for you. Sometimes I imagine people listening to me from faraway cities, early morning in New York, midnight in London, maybe afternoon somewhere in Africa. It makes me feel less alone. My name is Rosemary Hall, but most people just call me Rose. I am 70 years old, born and raised right here in Charleston, West Virginia. I've lived through enough winters and storms to know that life doesn't always give you the answers you're looking for, and that sometimes the people you love the most will be the ones to break your heart. They say, you can survive a storm if you know it's coming, but betrayal, it strikes when the sky looks clear. And that's exactly how my story begins. I had one son, Daniel, my only child. When he was born, I thought my life had finally found its purpose. I still remember holding him in my arms at the Charleston General Hospital, his tiny hand wrapping around my finger. From that day, I swore that no matter what life threw at me, I would give him the best of everything I could manage. His father, God rest his soul, was a coal miner, a man of strong hands and simple words. He passed away when Daniel was just 8 years old, leaving me with little more than a mortgage and a boy with eyes too sad for his age. I worked hard, harder than I thought I ever could. I took up jobs I never imagined doing. I cleaned houses, I waited tables, and in the evenings, I stitched clothes for the neighborhood women. A stitch in time saves 9, my mother used to say, and I held on to every dollar, every penny, making sure Daniel had food in his belly and books in his school bag. People told me I spoiled him, but I couldn't bear to say no. He was my son, my only family, my reason to breathe. Years went by, and Daniel grew up. Like most young men, he wanted more than what Charleston had to offer. When he turned 22, he left. Just for a while. Mom, he said, I'll go, I'll work, I'll save up, and then I'll come back and make you proud. His voice was full of promises, his smile full of confidence. I believed him, oh, how I believed him. But promises are like smoke. They look strong when they rise, but they vanish into the sky before you even realize they're gone. For 3 long years, I didn't see Daniel, not even once. Letters were rare, phone calls even rarer. And every holiday, every Christmas dinner, I would set his plate at the table, waiting, praying he would walk through the door. Neighbors pitied me, but I smiled, pretending to be strong. He'll come, I would say. A mother's heart knows. Deep down, I was afraid, but I kept the faith. Then one day, it was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I returned home from church and saw something that made my heart stop. My front porch was full of boxes, shoes scattered by the door, jackets hanging over the railing, music echoing faintly from inside. At first, I thought maybe I had walked into the wrong house. But no, this was my home, my roses blooming by the steps, the cross nailed above the door, the smell of fresh wood polish I had used just a week before. I pushed the door open, and there he was, my son, my Daniel. After 3 years of silence, he stood in my living room as if he had never left. For a second, my knees nearly gave out. I dropped my purse, Tears filled my eyes, and I whispered, "Daniel, you're home." My heart swelled with joy. I thought God had answered every prayer I had ever whispered into the night. But then I saw her, a young woman standing beside him, his wife. I didn't even know he had gotten married. She didn't smile. She didn't greet me. She looked at me the way some people look at weeds in a garden, like something that didn't belong. Daniel hugged me quickly, but there was no warmth in it. His eyes darted away, almost guilty. And then, before I could even gather myself, he said words that pierced deeper than any knife ever could. "Mom, listen, I need you to do me a favor. For a little while, can you stay in the guest house down the road? Just a few weeks, until we get settled. Claire doesn't really. She doesn't do well around new people." I froze. I thought I misheard him. This was my home, my roof, my walls. Every corner of that house held the sweat of my brow, the prayers of my lips, the memories of a lifetime. And here he was, my son, my boy, whom I raised with every ounce of strength I had, asking me to step aside, to move away, just to make his wife comfortable. New people. I wanted to scream. I wasn't a stranger. I was his mother. But the words caught in my throat. I looked at his wife, Claire, standing there with her arms folded, her chin tilted high as if she already owned the place. She didn't even flinch. I swallowed the lump in my throat. My hands trembled. "Daniel," I said softly, "this is my home. Where do you expect me to go?" His reply came fast, almost rehearsed. "Just for a little while, Mom. The guest house down the road is empty. I'll cover it for you. Please, don't make this harder." Harder? As if I was the problem. As if I was the weight dragging them down. My heart cracked in that moment, but my lips stayed shut. I had always forgiven him, always looked the other way. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I had loved him too much, shielded him too much, made him believe that my sacrifices didn't cost me anything. So I did what mothers do. I stepped back. I nodded slowly, holding back the tears threatening to fall. That evening, I packed a small bag and walked out of the very house I had built with my hands, leaving behind my kitchen, my photographs, my bed, all for the sake of my son's comfort. I stayed in that cold, lonely guest house for 5 days. 5 long days where the silence was my only companion. At night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering where I went wrong. Was I too soft? Was I too blind? Did I raise a son who no longer saw me as his home but as an obstacle? And yet, even as I asked myself these questions, deep inside, I still hoped. I hoped that Daniel would knock on the door, take me back inside, and say, "Mom, I'm sorry. Stay with me. Stay in your home." But the days dragged on, and no knock came. The nights inside the guest house were the loneliest I had ever known. The bed creaked under my weight, the windows rattled in the wind, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. It wasn't home. No matter how many prayers I whispered, no matter how tightly I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, it wasn't home. I had built my life in the other house. Every tile, every nail, every photograph on the wall carried a memory of the years I had lived there. And now I was sitting on a stranger's mattress, listening to laughter spilling from the house that should have been mine. On the 5th night, I could hear music drifting through the walls, loud, careless music, the sound of glasses clinking, the stomping of feet, voices raised in joy. My son's voice. Laughter that I had once longed to hear again. But now it wasn't mine to share. He laughed with her, with his wife, with strangers. Not with me. Not with the woman who raised him. I pressed my hands over my ears. But it didn't stop the ache in my chest. Do you know what it feels like to be alive yet invisible? To breathe the same air, to live only a few steps away, and yet to be treated like a ghost. That's what those nights taught me. By the 6th morning, my patience broke. I walked back to the house that was still legally mine, and knocked firmly on the door. Claire answered. She didn't smile, didn't even feign politeness. She looked me up and down as though I were an intruder. When are you leaving? I asked her. My voice was calm, but my heart was pounding. It's been almost a week. This is my home, and I need some peace. The parties at night, they disturb me. I can't rest. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She simply crossed her arms and said, "We're not leaving. This is our home now. Daniel and I are going to live here permanently. If you're uncomfortable, maybe you should consider finding somewhere else." For a moment, the world spun around me. My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. My son had not even come to the door. It was his wife speaking for him, making decisions as if I no longer existed. And then, as if the wound wasn't deep enough, she added with a shrug, "You've had your life, Rose. Now let us have ours. Don't be selfish, selfish." The word echoed in my ears like a curse. Me, selfish? The woman who had worked 3 jobs to put food in her son's mouth? The mother who went without new clothes, who skipped meals, who prayed every night for his safety? The mother who never remarried because she didn't want him to feel abandoned? I wanted to scream. I wanted to rage. But instead, I walked away. Sometimes silence is heavier than words. That evening, I sat in the guest house staring at the ceiling. Tears slid down my face silently, soaking into the thin pillow beneath my head. My heart was broken. Yes, but something else stirred inside me, something sharp and burning. Dignity. They thought they could push me aside, take my home, erase my existence. They thought I would swallow my pain and continue shrinking into the shadows. But I had lived too long, suffered too much, and learned too many truths about people to let that happen. There's a saying my father used to repeat whenever times grew tough. You can bend with the wind, Rose, but don't ever let it uproot you. And that night, I decided I would not be uprooted. The next morning, I walked into town. My hands trembled as I signed the papers, but I knew what I was doing. I sold the house, the very home I had built, the walls I had painted with my own hands, the garden I had tended for decades. I sold it, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to remind my son and his wife of one thing they had forgotten. Nothing in this life comes free. By the end of that week, a new owner stood at the doorway, a polite man in his 40s, neatly dressed, with eyes that told me he believed in rules. I shook his hand and handed him the keys. "It's all yours now," I said softly, and just like that, everything changed. Daniel and Claire were stunned when the landlord arrived, introducing himself as the rightful owner of the house. He asked about rent, about agreements, about payments. Their faces drained of color. For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in Claire's confident eyes. She hadn't expected this. Neither had Daniel. I didn't gloat. I didn't stand there to watch their humiliation. I simply walked back to my new apartment, small, modest, tucked away at the edge of town. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Mine alone. The rent was paid from the money I had earned through the sale. And though the rooms were bare, they were filled with something precious. Peace. Yet, even as I sat by the window that night, sipping tea from my chipped cup, I couldn't shake the weight on my chest. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about losing the photographs on the wall or the rose bushes in the garden. It was about my son, my only son, choosing to push me aside, choosing to treat me as if I were nothing. I kept asking myself, where did I go wrong? Did I give him too much freedom? Did I love him so blindly that I raised a man who didn't know the meaning of loyalty? Or was it something deeper, that no matter how much love you pour into someone, they can still turn away? I remembered the first time he ever rode a bike, how he had fallen and scraped his knees. He cried, and I ran to him, scooped him up, kissed the blood away. "Don't worry, Danny," I told him. "Pain is just proof that you're alive. Get back up." And he had. That was the son I knew, the boy who got back up. But the man standing in my house now, allowing his wife to belittle me, was no longer that boy. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't stop loving him. Love is the cruelest prison, isn't it? It binds you to someone even when they hurt you. Weeks passed in my apartment. I heard whispers from neighbors about how shocked Daniel and Claire were, how they scrambled to figure out where they would live. Some said they tried negotiating with the new landlord. Others said they considered leaving town altogether. But I didn't ask. I didn't interfere. For once, I let life teach them the lessons I had tried for years to protect them from. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the sunset paint the sky in strokes of gold and crimson, I realized something. This was not the end of my story. It was only the middle. Yes, I had lost a home. Yes, I had been betrayed by my own son, but I was still alive. I still had strength in my bones, wisdom in my heart, and dignity in my soul. And dignity, once awakened, does not go back to sleep. That night, I decided I would no longer live in silence, waiting for apologies that might never come. I would build a life for myself, one that didn't depend on Daniel's choices, one that wasn't at the mercy of Claire's contempt. I had spent 70 years giving, sacrificing, bending. Now, I would stand tall. But little did I know, the choices I made next would change everything, not just for me, but for Daniel as well. Life has a way of circling back, of delivering justice in ways you never expect. And though I didn't see it then, my story was only beginning. Asterisk, when I closed the door of my new apartment that night, something in me shifted. It was quiet to quiet. No creaking floors, no photographs on the walls, no memories whispering through the hallways. Just silence. For the first time in decades, I lived in a place untouched by Daniel, untouched by his absence, his return, or his betrayal. But freedom is a strange thing. It can taste sweet one moment and unbearably lonely the next. I tried to build routines. Each morning I woke early, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat by the window watching the world outside. People hurried to work, children chased school buses, neighbors waved across driveways. Life went on as if nothing in the world had cracked, but mine had. Sometimes, when the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself reaching for the phone, tempted to call Daniel, to ask how he was, to remind him to eat, to beg him to remember the boy who once clung to my hand when crossing the street. But my pride stopped me. My dignity reminded me, No, Rose. You've done your part. Let him walk his own path. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, a knock came at my door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there. My son. My only son. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow. He looked older, worn, as though the weight of the last few weeks had settled on his shoulders. Claire wasn't with him. Mom, he said quietly. The word pierced me. I had waited so long to hear it spoken with softness again. My throat tightened. Daniel, I whispered. What brings you here? He shifted on his feet. The landlord, he's not letting us stay. Rent's due. And Claire, his voice cracked. Claire left. She said she didn't sign up for this. She went back to her parents. I stared at him, my heart breaking and swelling all at once. My son was finally standing before me, not as the arrogant man who pushed me aside, but as the lost boy I had once held in my arms. I didn't know where else to go, he admitted, his eyes glistening. I stepped aside, letting him in. He walked slowly, as though ashamed of each step. We sat at the small kitchen table. He looked around the apartment, his hands restless. You sold the house, he said, more statement than question. Yes, I replied simply. Why? His voice was sharp, but beneath it was confusion, desperation. I met his gaze. Because I needed to remind you, Daniel, that nothing in this life is free. That house, it wasn't just walls and furniture. It was decades of sacrifice. It was mine to give, and yours to respect. But when you let Claire treat me like a stranger in my own home, when you told me to step aside as if I didn't matter, you broke something I can't easily repair. His head dropped into his hands. His shoulders shook. I'm sorry, Mom. God, I'm so sorry. I thought, his voice caught. I thought she needed me to choose her, to put her first. I didn't realize I was throwing you away. Tears welled in my eyes. Daniel, I never asked you to choose between us. Love isn't a competition. But when you let her push me aside, when you stood silent while she spoke to me like I was less than nothing, you chose. And it wasn't me. The silence between us stretched. He wept quietly, and I watched him, torn between the urge to cradle him like the boy he once was, and the need to stand firm in the lesson he had to learn. Finally, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. I forgive you, I whispered, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You'll have to build your life again without shortcuts, without leaning on me to carry the weight. I'll stand by you, but I won't carry you anymore. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his cheeks. That night, he slept on the small couch in my living room. I sat awake for hours, watching his chest rise and fall, remembering the nights I had stayed up by his crib, praying he would grow strong. And now here he was again, fragile in a different way, broken not by childhood sickness but by his own choices. Over the next weeks, Daniel came to me often. He found small jobs, nothing glamorous, just enough to cover rent and food. Sometimes he failed. Sometimes he came to me defeated, ready to quit. And each time, I reminded him, stand up, Daniel. Pain is proof you're alive. Get back up. Slowly, he began to change. Not overnight, not in a miracle, but in small steps, the kind of steps that last. One Sunday morning, we walked together past the old house. The roses in the garden were still blooming, though I no longer tended them. Daniel stopped at the gate, his face heavy with regret. I see now what I lost, he murmured. You didn't just lose a house, Daniel, I told him softly. You almost lost your mother, and that's a loss no house can ever replace. He nodded, swallowing hard. As months turned into a year, we rebuilt something, not the same bond we once had, but something new, something forged through fire. And those scars remained. Love stitched us together in ways words can't explain now. As I sit here telling you this story, I want to leave you with this. Never take the people who love you for granted. Homes can be sold, possessions can vanish, but once trust is broken, it takes years to rebuild if it can be rebuilt at all. Asterisk. Life has taught me many lessons, but this one stands above the rest. Respect the hands that raised you, or one day you may find yourself with nothing to hold onto. I forgave my son because a mother's love bends even when it breaks. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means moving forward with open eyes, guarding your dignity, and teaching those you love that respect is the foundation of every bond. So, if you are listening to my story tonight, wherever you are, whatever time it is, remember this. Do not wait until the roses stop blooming to realize their worth. Cherish them while you can, because once the garden is gone, all that remains are thorns.